Train. I'm joined here with Alan Gallant, those Collinsport boys, and Jewel cannot be with us at the moment. He is fighting a storm. He's fighting the elements. So the discussion of wrong is right has to wait for a little bit. But Alan and I had a topic that we've talked about with each other in the past. We thought we might share it with you and get your thoughts. And that is, uh, when is Dark Shadows a sitcom? One of the more controversial allegations that I made in the daybook that I was given a real drubbing for on Facebook at one point was my contention, and of course, there's a little bit of literary exaggeration here, that Dark Shadows is a sitcom. And clearly it's not, but boy, it sure comes close in places, but so does life. So that's where, and here comes Lincoln. Cosmic inevitability.
Yeah,
Let's see if he
like
knocks
Lincoln.
it over tonight. Talking about, oh, there he is. Cough it up, Lincoln.
Hey, Lincoln. Taking a left
There,
turn off Dock Street and right into Collinsport Bay.
there he goes. There he goes, having eclipsed the screen yet again. And he's sitting on the edge of the arm. So yeah, what's your first blush on this topic, on this issue?
Well, I want to go a little. One of the places that really got me thinking about the fact that this was a sitcom and that this lined up, what you were talking about lined up, was the fabulous and famous Granny's Will scene from 1897.
That's
Uh,
an episode you really like.
oh yes, I do. I
So
actually used it once I was asked to audition as a director at a high school,
uh
as a guest director, and I carefully typed that scene out, made several copies of it, and took it to my audition and handed it out to students and said, "Let's see what you can do with this."
now just so people can look it up. Do you remember the episode number?
Mm-mm. But I will find it very quickly while we're still
Okay.
talking. Yeah.
Okay. So this is when Grandmama's will is being read to the family, and they each react in very individualistic but wonderfully predictable ways. There's a term I like to use, which is cosmic inevitability, and that's where everything acts exactly the way you're afraid it will, and it almost must, sort of in the words of James Whale, because it's part of the ritual.
Yes. Yes, and the thing is that all of the characters become incredibly finely drawn in that scene.
Yes,
All of the lines of business are there. The simpering Carl Collins, the morally offended Edward, the joking and completely black humor of Quentin.
sure.
It's all kind of there. And Judith, for the first time, however, is completely and totally imperious, other than being impossible for her brothers.
Sure. That's a sneak preview of coming attractions.
Yes. Grandmother's will is read, Dark Shadows.
Gonna be early 700s. I would say like
Yeah,
720,
yeah,
somewhere around there.
yeah,
Maybe not even that much. Because it gets off to the races almost immediately.
yeah. I'm looking at very early 700s.
Uh-huh.
And 706.
Does Quentin know the real will is going to be read, or is he still thinking it's going to be the fake will that he swapped out?
I think, I think he, I think he thinks it's the real will because he doesn't act surprised.
Yeah.
Really doesn't act surprised. He doesn't act like, oh, curse is foiled again. He
Yeah.
just jokes about it because he's having such a good time watching his brothers completely collapse
Yes.
in the scene. And
know,
he at once insults and compliments Judith in that scene as well.
So you have a sibling, I believe, at least
I have
one,
two
right?
brothers.
You have two. So are all of the legends I hear about sort of birth order being destiny accurate?
Fairly well so, actually. Yes, being the baby of the family, I was definitely relegated to to the ineffectualness of a Carl Collins, especially when I was like under the age of 15.
Okay.
You know, they pat on top of the head and go away, please. You know, don't
So do you
irritate us too much. That
so
kind
do
of.
you see birth order playing out here?
Um, to a certain degree, I think. I think that in terms of the boys, Quentin is the middle child, and it's definitely playing out there. The middle child tends to be the most rebellious
Okay.
of them. My brother Michael certainly was that. He was the hippie of the bunch of us.
Okay.
And when he was in college and so forth, he grew his hair down halfway down his back and did all of those sorts of things. Um, Wanted to be a marine biologist at one point. You know, everything he could think of that was going to be vastly different than anybody else. Um, my oldest brother was not like Edward. He wasn't stiff like Edward, but he was the one that was probably he led the way in terms of responsibility. He was the first child. He was the first one in our family to graduate from college. In our immediate family, that sort of. So he was leading the way in
Okay.
ways like that. And I, on the other hand, you know, dissolute youth and the whole 9 yards, and theater, blah blah blah.
You're just out for kicks.
Yes, and I was looking for attention, and I got it. I got it in spades. Let's see. Yes, I think I'm trying to find it here.
This might have been a dangerous question to ask.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
Wow.
weirdly, I'm not being able to find it really quick. I tell you what I will do though. I've got a concordance here.
Aha.
I'm not.
Those are great.
For those of you who have never seen this, this was produced by Kathy Resch in the 90s, I believe. This was the very last one that they did in print. I also have the 80s copy of the 1897 concordance as well, which is kind of a cool thing to have. But this thing is incredibly detailed in terms of
It's in the best sense, it is exhausting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And this was after this was put out. Let's see. Actually, it might have been the late 80s. I've got to figure.
I think it was late 80s.
Wait a minute. No, it was 90s for this one.
Okay.
It was post 92 actually, because they mentioned 92 in here.
I'll tell you what, that's a
Yeah.
curse the mail order days, because if you were not on that mailing list, if you were not in the right places at the right time,
You
forget
were
it.
out of the loop.
These were legends to me,
Yes.
and I had to hunt them down and stumble across them by accident. It was and it was a real joy when you would find one. Of course, eBay changed all of that. But the one I had really, in fact, it was the only one I had for the longest time, but it was the Rosetta Stone, was over the part of the series that never made it into syndication, or very rarely made it into syndication, which is the 1840 Concordance.
Yes.
Which I think maybe dealt with some of 1995, in fact. It just is that last chunk of the series.
The 1840 does deal with 1995.
Yeah.
It's incomplete there. Yes.
And Warren Odson wrote an essay about Angelique trying to follow her timeline. And I found that to be one of the most revealing essays on Dark Shadows I'd ever read. And it informed my thinking on the series and on the issue of timeline in the series and mythos in the series more than anything else. I really wish he were with us, because I would love to shake his hand.
Absolutely, the guy was a bit of a genius, and he was a true artist. His illustrations were incredible. There's Grandmama.
Oh my God, yeah.
And that's one style. And then you have a little bit more. There's Rachel Drummond.
Yeah,
a little bit more detail there. But then he would go into he would do like these charcoal, these really heavy charcoal things.
Yes.
These really amazing stuff. Incredible. And he was really good at mixing scenes, characters in different scenes in the same panel.
Yes.
It was,
You know, you could get some great tattoos based on his art.
yes. And I think that's the will scene right there.
There they are. I believe it is.
Yeah. And that would be, let's see if it's actually listed here. Yes, here it is, 7/14. Taped on March 13th, 1969, and aired on the 20th of March, 1969.
And the episode again is which one?
7/14.
7/14. I was 6
Yep.
off.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty close considering 1,225 episodes.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. I should write some books about the show. There's that in that piece of art that you just showed me. There's a hilarious couch. I know there had to be a term for a couch like that. That sort of double S shaped. That three people could sit in, and
I think it was like called an. I can't. It had something to do with courtship.
Yeah. Well, to make sure no one made out.
Right, but at the same time, you're facing in opposite directions, but you're right there to do your little.
That's right.
Thing.
So. I imagine Cy Tomashaw finding that in a rental house,
sure,
and bringing it in and saying, "Well, we can finally do 1897."
Mm-hmm. That in the Davenport, which
what's
was
the Davenport?
The Davenport was the red couch in 1897. Did
it have sort of a swoop to it?
It on the back, yes, it did.
Yeah.
That's the Davenport. And also, one of the other brilliant things, which could be extremely absurd or it could be used for extreme mystery, was the balloon chair.
I was about to mention the balloon chair in Barnabas's place. It doesn't doesn't Quentin, when he's horribly misshapen by the hand or something, hide? Evan Hanley does. Yeah, nothing to see here. Everything's fine. Just go away. and okay, so it brings us to our point that's a very funny moment, and I'm convinced that the writers knew it was a funny moment.
Oh, absolutely. And Violet Wells wrote incredible early dialogue that established Quentin as a wit. I mean, particularly Quentin, but other characters as well. But particularly Quentin. Quentin always had the answer, sarcasm included for almost anything.
And the writing's terrific because, Dark Shadows is so serious and there's such stakes that the characters deal with for so much of the time that you almost begin to think that in the writing process, they didn't have the time for wit. And, that's the impression I always felt. And then when Quentin explodes and is so
when he starts to speak,
that you really see that no, they were just holding their action in D&D sense, and boy, when they let it go, they really let it go.
I can just almost hear Gordon Russell and Violet Wells getting together and saying, "Hey, this guy's going to start talking soon. What are we going to do with this?"
That's right. Let's let him be funny. Let's let him have all of the observations we have in writing sessions,
right?
About what's going on, because there are places where Quentin has such an affectionate detachment to what's happening that he feels like one of the writers.
Yes, and he has that detachment, and he also has the irreverence necessary, the rebellion and the irreverence necessary to be able to voice these observations and have it make sense in character.
Yes,
it's not suddenly Judith is blurting this stuff out. So
I think also being able to start in 1897 with a fresh slate gives them the opportunity to really establish those characters. Lincoln, I swear to God, establish those characters in that sense. With Roger, they sort of play catch up. His wit at first, his wit's always acerbic. He's making jokes in the first episode,
but he's dark.
But they're not funny, and I don't even know if he means them to be funny. He kind of embodies the Michael O'Donoghue quote of making people laugh is the cheapest form of comedy,
right?
Which I love. And but once he kind of transforms into everyone's favorite gay uncle, he's a riot. He's very funny.
He is. His head starts bobbling more, and he starts, I think after he said, I think the writers clicked after he made the mistake and he said, seemed like 100 miles.
Oh yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
corrected himself when,
Which is such a human moment.
yes,
And all of the places, I hate to use the term all, but I will, all the places where Jonathan Frid flubs a line or something. And there were many lines flubbed. It wasn't just him,
mm,
but because he had so much focus, and was such an intentional character, such a serious character,
he
they
never
stood
lost
out
it.
more.
Yeah.
But I never found those funny, or if I found them funny, I found them funny in watching him try to recover, because I am guilty of tons of malapropisms, and I forget my lines in real
Yes.
life half the
Sure.
time, and to do whatever you want, but just keep it down.
You're right.
uh
Like,
and to me that is such a glorious moment, because he starts out with such sound and fury, and he's undone by all of the things he has to keep in his mind at once. And it's
right.
just, look, I was going to say something important, but just I don't have
Just keep
time
it
for it
down.
anymore. Just keep it down. Just keep it down.
Whatever it is, Willie, just keep it down.
Just keep it down.
It's great.
And he struggles for a moment even with that. Just keep it down. To me, you could not have written or directed a better human moment.
Right. Exactly. It's the other. It's like that night must go
Oh,
nothing
nothing
wrong.
wrong, which is a true Austin Powers allow myself to introduce myself moment,
Yes.
because he catches himself
He
right
knows
on
it's
about the
yeah. He
last
knows it's
word,
coming out wrong.
but he commits to it.
Yeah.
And the humor is nothing without some sort of identification factor, and we can all, if we're honest, identify with those moments,
And I think,
especially.
yeah, and the great thing is, as you said before, I mean, living life, many moments of humor are unintentional, and those
Sure,
are the best ones, And
sure.
even though not all the humor in Dark Shadows is unintentional, because I just don't think that Sam Hall and Violet Wells and even Gordon Russell were unfunny people.
Oh my
Uh,
God,
you
I
know,
mean, Count Patofi.
yeah. Or is it
Well,
Petofi? You say Petofi, I say
I say
Petofi. Let's
Patofi,
call
let's
the
call the
whole
whole
thing
thing
off.
off. You say Barana, I say Barana, let's call the whole thing Orf.
or
um but very few people get that joke. I'm glad you do. The For me, the first real rib tickler on the show, I mean, just, it's probably not the first, but the first I remember is, you were a bully, you were a hypocrite, you were a truly evil man, a man after my own heart.
oh yes,
When Nicholas Blair revives Trask, and Trask
Trask.
does his wuju, and
Yes, exactly.
very good, very good.
Yes.
Um, it left the runway.
It did, and it's classic too. It was a classic delivery. It's a classic sort of line, something that you would expect um, Walter Houston to deliver,
Yes,
and that sort of thing. So
that
it's
to me, that's the first really openly, broadly funny moment, but yet appropriate. It comes out of the characters, but then by the time the Count shows up, all bets are off. Aristide compliments some clothing or something like that, and
yeah,
Patofi says, "Yes, you would notice that."
yes.
Um, it's just so
Well, Patofi
catty.
had a sense of humor. Of course, being sort of gleefully evil as he was, he had humor in some of the darkest scenes. Like, you must excuse Aristide, he's so evil. It's that kind of thing.
I think one of the things that really helps that character is that he has no allegiance to any higher god. As he says, "I have one god, and his name is Patofi."
Patofi.
Um, and that he is not obligated to pay lip service to anything other than his own pursuit of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so he is, by the very, very definition of the word, he is truly irreverent.
Yes, yes, and he's, depending on who he's talking to, he's always the superior in the conversation, at least to himself, but most of the time in reality.
Well, and even if he's not, he is not, he's going to make sure they know that they do not have the intellectual better of him. He's
Mhm.
not going to give them his sanction.
Right. Yes, that's correct. I particularly love the way he would talk to Charles Tate as if he were a child most of the time.
Sure, now Charles.
You know,
And Tate kind of acted like a kid,
he did.
so
Absolutely.
that fit. One of the other places on the show, just and this file this one under running gag, is the running gag of constantly leaving the room right before Lang's recording switches over to his instructions.
Yes,
That
yes.
would have solved everything. And who's the one person who keeps hearing it? The guy who can't talk.
Right, right. Or the kid that nobody believes.
The kid nobody believes. Sure, sure. I mean, after the third time it happens, you can hear the moment the tape recorder comes out. You can almost hear the non-existent studio audience begin to titter because they know what's coming up.
That's right. They're only going to hear Eine kleine Nacht
That's
music again.
that's right. That's it. And they're so sick of it. God, why do you love that recording so much? All right. Well, what's that? Someone's at the door? Okay. Oh, it's Mary Kay. Julia, you want to get that pink Cadillac? It could be yours. Come on up. Okay. And
Julia,
then
if you do the experiment. Yeah, it's
right,
true.
and
It's
then it
very
switches
sitcom.
back.
That's total sitcom. It's
It switches
literally.
back to the music just when they come back
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
and but how much of life is full of frustrations like that we only later find out, if you had just stayed
Uh,
a moment longer.
that's right. It would have happened. Yep, it's very true. I also another ongoing gag that isn't. Sometimes it's verbalized, but sometimes it's not. Is when Barnabas is waxing poetic about whichever incarnation of Josette he's missing that day, or it's Vicky, or it's something. And Grayson is standing there as Julia, and just like her eyes start to go. It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's start to go.
I imagine, and this is the sort of thing that I would be a very dangerous producer for Dark Shadows, because I would really want to push it in this direction. But Barnabas is talking about the old days and how beautiful it was, everything candlelit, and how he's
Mm,
preserved the old house exactly as it was. And you hear a toilet flush,
yeah,
and Joey comes out and he says, "Well, mostly."
mostly that's a
Uh,
concession
one
for.
of the one of the suggestions that I had to Mark Perry was that at the end of the credits on every episode, it would cut back to a scene that we had seen on the episode, and that there would be, but it would be a scene where it cut to something else, and clearly the characters were still there, when it cut away. Well, this would have them say the same line, and then you would see what they said right after that. So Barnabas is once again swearing to rebuild, and so on and so forth, and and then it continues with him saying something like, "And of course, to do so, I must encounter my greatest foes I've ever known." And Willie just says, contractors, and just little observations that are not out of character,
Right.
that don't break the scene, but it's just a little bit of lanyap
It, it
afterwards.
it
And that
seeps
it would
in
be
a little bit more of the real world outside of
yes,
Dune. Yeah.
and it would be a signature at the end of every episode, except for the most serious
Right.
of episodes. Um, because I really started to think about, and this goes away from the funny, but I was just thinking about some of the conversations, and one of the parts of hell of Barnabas's life is having to go to bed just when the best consequences of his best actions were enjoyed by everyone. That he misses all the stuff in the daytime
Mm-hmm.
where people are enjoying themselves, or he saved the day somehow, and they're all relieved. He never gets to see that.
Right.
He never gets to that. And that's just, I mean, it sort of brings the room down for me to mention that. But I don't think that's anything we really think about, is the other consequence of him having to flee into the coffin is that he misses this huge chunk of life and reactions. And I always wondered if on the best days, when things were going normally, which is never,
Near
if
normal.
yeah, if Willie was by his coffin side, with his big chief tablet and his red crayon, and
Got a list of shit that needs to be
he's
done.
written notes of the day, what's going on, good and bad, sort of
Yeah,
Barnabas's briefing, his security
yeah.
briefing when he wakes up.
Barnabas, I need a couple more jewels here. We had a couple. The refrigerator broke. What's a refrigerator?
Roger's got a bunch of new ascots,
Yeah.
so we got to figure out what to do with the old ones. Do you want them? He asked me if you wanted them. It's like, no, I don't want ascots. I have one, and I don't wear it that often. It's not me. Uh, what am I, Ben Cross? That guy with the turtlenecks.
That guy.
Um, what
Eliminating
a
the ascot problem, though.
That's true. What a disastrous choice. Those turtlenecks. Someone really had to talk to him.
It was like, I don't know. It was like he was a poetry professor sometimes. It was like.
Well, it reminds me of the Will Ferrell skit, The Lovers, where he was one of those two academics who was just
Yeah.
far into discussing his love life with everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, but we're lovers. I think he was clad eternally in a turtleneck.
Yes.
Yes. So, but yeah, I think, because I remember the person I got into the discussion with, really, I mean, I take Dark Shadows seriously, but this was serious to the point this poor guy couldn't see anything else. I just don't know what's funny about kidnapping and brainwashing and all these other things. It's like, well, no, those aren't funny.
Right.
You're
But
taken on their own, but circumstances surrounding them. I mean, let me introduce you to Stanley Kubrick and what he did for nuclear war.
right. Exactly. And so let me introduce you to Jonathan Frid and what he did for absurd situations at night where he had to make an excuse all the time for not
Sure.
being there at dawn.
Sure. Well, one moment with my closing credits idea is, after Eve is brought to life and so on, and is walking around, and Barnabas and Willie, observe this and so on, and the scene would have cut away to Adam and Eve talking, and instead it just stays on Barnabas and Willie, and Barnabas just said, "Black pantyhose, Willie, you really went all out, because I didn't put them on her, and Julia didn't put them on her, and we've got to have a long talk about boundaries, a word I recently learned from Carolyn." And it just cuts, because that's a weird moment. Who
It
put
is
the pantyhose on Eve, and
right.
why? Who thought this was the perfect thing? I mean, it was, but
It was.
I mean, it
And
was.
the
It was
only
a good
the only thing
choice.
that retconned it into appropriateness was the fact that Eve was brought to life.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's
That
like necrophilia anyway.
It's really weird, and she's a tall lady, so that had to be a lot of work by Willie. Willie
Yes.
had to be right there
Yes.
for a long period of it, and then I imagined, Barnabas coming down the stairs into the cellar and catching Willie doing this, and just not even saying a word, just turning around and walking right back
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Right. Oops. And scene.
Just that just like when he in 1897, when he walks on during the closing credits with his civilian clothes over his arm, and just goes,
Yeah.
it's exactly that
Yes.
timing.
Yes. Yes. Miss Wallace's Fashions by
Yes.
Amazon Sophisticates.
Sure. And I what would be far more, I mean, the episode's very entertaining, but what would be far more entertaining is that we can't be the first to have noticed this. The writers had to bring it up.
Yes.
I'm sure the writers and the Leela Swift and others had to bring this up, and just they had to have had a huge laugh over it. Marie Wallace had to say, "So who put the pantyhose on me?"
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, why, after the discussion about why she doesn't have the scars and so on that Adam has, it's like, yeah, exactly.
And thank God Adam is so dim-witted, or rather innocent,
Yes.
that this question doesn't occur to him, because they would all be dead.
Exactly. It's like,
And the last thing Willie Loomis would hear would be Adam bellowing pantyhose over him. And that's funny.
yes. Yes, especially when accompanied by a Bob Covert sting. Pantyhose, dun, dun, dun. Tune in next week.
Willie strangled with the pantyhose.
Yeah,
And what Adam would be actually when Nicholas would finally talk to him. Now, Adam, why did you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Was I born with pantyhose? No. Once again, I am denied.
I am denied.
Barnabas.
You had her box slacks on, Adam.
Those were very fine LL Bean socks we gave you. I want you to know they were good. They were woolly.
Cushioning
I used those
on
in the winter.
Yes.
That was that I wore those in my Keen boots. They were wonderful. I would like them back, but I've seen what you've done to them, and you keep them. But if you see them in a catalog, Adam, if you see them in a catalog, I would just appreciate it if you maybe thought of getting me a pair.
I take a size 10, yes.
10 and a half, yeah. We'll see, Barnabas. We'll see.
One of the
it's a funny show.
I'm not sure this scene was intentionally funny, although I think Don Briscoe's characterization in his first episode is interesting because he's testing the boundaries of what his character might be.
Is this as Tom or as Chris?
This is as Tom. And when he as Chris, there's
I'll go down and look at it, but I don't know if I should.
Hoffman's reaction to him in the hospital when she first sees him. I mean, that's because of Grayson's particular brand of screaming is a lower octave brand. But when
Peter's like,
it's interesting because when Tom shows up, he's like he just lurches into the scene basically, and he goes, oh, and he actually jumps Nicholas. Nobody jumps Nicholas, and he jumps him in that scene.
Now wait, is this his first scene as a vampire?
No, it's his first scene as a human before he becomes a vampire. But when I
don't remember that. I just remember him showing up as a hapless.
Yeah, he shows up as a hapless handyman, and in the first episode, he comes down in the basement because he's been doing stuff around Blair House because he's been hired in by Nicholas to check the wiring and do all this stuff. And he comes in and he says, I just thought I'd check all of the, the stuff.
To check the house, make sure it's all safe for everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And he goes, and Nicholas goes, no, that's okay. You can go back upstairs. I think everything's quite nice down here. He says,
are you sure you paid me for?
No. And he opens the door and he finds the coffin. And he stands there and he just kind of goes like a kid who's just walked into his first orgy or something. It's like
we've all been there.
What's that? What does it look like? An orgy? Okay. And that's sort of one of those Three's Company things where somebody walks in and misapprehends what's happening on the couch.
Sure. It's like, well, why don't you look? It doesn't Nicholas then say, why don't you look inside? Does he do that?
No,
I think
he says, doesn't. What does it look like though? And he makes him say a coffin.
And then he says, private business.
Open it. I've seen it. It's empty. Is what he says to him. So
yeah. It's you're Mr. Blair. Your private interest is your private life. I'm not here to invade in that.
That's right.
Yeah. How do you get leverage? That's what I don't understand.
How do you climb into that? But he's kind of like that. He's kind of a combination of that Three's Company, Larry walking in on Tripper with 4 women on the couch.
Richard Klein. And he was good.
Yeah. And on the other hand, maybe some hapless handyman from Green Acres or something like that.
Sure.
I mean, just like that kind of thing. When he's first.
That is a funny moment. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
It's just sort of this. It's that sort of awkward, funny, weird.
Well, speaking of awkward, funny, Reverend Bland, who performs the wedding, and it's just the wind.
Yeah.
It's just blowing windows open and all this,
Yeah.
Barnabas making one excuse after another, and then Bland just sticking his foot in his mouth constantly. Oh, nobody shows fidelity to one another like you Collins is. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
that's right. That's right. If you see the shambling ghost of Jeremiah, just tell him
Just tell him how.
I've gone bowling.
That's right. How loyal we are to one another. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So I don't know if there are people who don't feel like they have permission, because there's two different levels of laughs with Dark Shadows. There is the blooper level and the wobbling tombstone level, which I don't find funny. I just admire the work that they're doing. I mean, I'm just happy
Right.
there's a tombstone there at all.
Well,
I don't even see the wobbling
right.
really. I just filter it out. And that's this Christopher Isherwood thing I come back to. That's making fun of Dark Shadows.
Yeah.
And and I don't know why people are so fond of that. Uh because
I think
I
it's on a and I don't mean this in a bad way, because I think anybody can be on this level at one time or another. I think it's on a Three Stooges level, and there's transference there, because
yes,
it is a whoopsie, uh, and
yeah.
and it's kind of on that really basic level, like. It still doesn't seem real, even though it's a whoopsie. It doesn't seem real, I think, to a lot of people. It's just like become part of the show. It's like a pratfall.
Yeah.
You laugh at a pratfall in a comedy. You wouldn't in real life.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like, I mean, a tombstone wobbles in real life, I'm gonna be profoundly concerned. That's not a funny moment at all. That's
Right.
there's a seismic
Why is
issue
this
going on.
tombstone made out of styrofoam? You know.
Um but I do think it's okay, and this is an important differentiation. Not that I'm here to give any permission on what they should find funny or not. That's
That's
theirs.
their thing.
But for me, I do think it's possible to make fun out of Dark Shadows, to sort of collect the internal absurdities within the story and so on and so forth. That at some point, it's a point we don't see because it's not in the episode,
Mhm.
but that the characters are aware of.
Yes, and there's some intention in the writing in many cases as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that definitely honors what's being done in terms of craft.
So if there were one to kind of wrap this up, if there were one episode for just sheer humor for you, would it be 714
Yeah, I think
to
so.
to
I
end
it
people?
just I've always, because it's a familiar trope, and they've taken it to, and it's also crafted really well in terms of character establishment and firming up the various character sort of qualities in a lot of these
Yes.
people. And it's only 14 episodes into that particular storyline. So you've gotten some of that already, but now it's like it's coalescing and they're at each other.
I
They're
don't have
at each other.
I don't have the episode number, but for me it would be um the Trask being revived by Nicholas Blair.
Sure, sure. That's
Which
episode. I think it's I think it's 523. That's when
okay,
that scene expands at the end of 522 and into 523.
okay. Because that's just a delight. And it was no surprise when I learned that Bud Estrado, when he was in the army, was maybe it was even with the USO or something. He did a lot of stand-up comedy,
He did. Yes.
performing for troops and such.
Yeah, he did. He did a lot of entertainment stuff. And he also ended up managing and acting in his own theater company after he got done with, I think, Pasadena Playhouse, which is quite a prestigious place to
Oh,
go
very prestigious.
learn your craft, and was even back then in the 50s when he got out of the army. But I guess he was supposed to be a lawyer. I think he was intending to be a
Uh-huh.
lawyer at one point in his career, and his dad was a grocer in San Francisco or something like
San
that.
Diego.
San Diego, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, he took a turn for that, and we're all glad he did.
And we are. That I got to do an interview with him, and I felt very lucky about that.
Yes,
I
I've
really
I've heard that interview. It's
really
great.
enjoyed it. I was terrified because he pulled a fast one on me at the very beginning, because I used a phrase that is director ease and drama ease, which he speaks. Come on,
Right.
Humbert.
Right.
But talking about how he's really good with language, and he threw me off a minute. He said, "What does that mean? Very good with language. What do you mean by that?"
That's a teacher
And
question. He's
it
asking. He's
is, it
asking you.
is, and I managed to stammer my way out of it just because I wasn't expecting it. But that really kept me on my toes.
Mm-hmm.
And I had promised him I wouldn't ask him Dark Shadows questions because he had, I think he had indicated, uh, maybe personally, because we had to correspond a long time
Mm-hmm.
before I could do the interview.
Sure.
And he asked my whole life story and all these other things. Um, and I got the impression that he did not really want to talk about Dark Shadows. And so, frankly, I was happy to talk to him about about Equus and all this other stuff that he had done. He
Sure.
toured in Equus as Alan Strang's father for
Yes,
a
he did.
while.
He did.
And I'm sure he was smart. Of course, he would have made a great dice art. He
Yes.
would have made a magnificent dice art. But and
Yeah,
an
his
interesting
career was so.
Salieri talking about Peter
Yeah.
Shaffer.
I mean, yeah. I mean, his career was so long and varied. I mean,
Yeah.
he had like a 40-year career as an actor, and
Yes.
also as a producer and a director and a teacher. I guess it
Oh,
was
wow.
um, Laura Parker commented on the fact that he was a font of information. He was very
Oh,
much
yeah.
sure for her. I mean, he was a
Yeah.
mentor to her during that show. But I mean, that was a blip on his radar in terms of it was a great couple of years that he did, which we're all very appreciative of, and he showed
Yeah.
the world what he was capable of as an actor. But it was
And
only a small section of what he did, and I thought you covered and allowed him to cover his career brilliantly. So,
well, the other nice thing was that Wallace had really, because Wallace is a newsman and a hardcore newsman, and he has a heart the size of China, but he can shut it off when he needs to. And
sure,
he's like Patrick, ask him Dark Shadows questions anyway.
yeah, so
But
do it
he
anyway.
didn't say, Patrick, I'm your boss, and I want you. But
Right,
essentially, I certainly read it as that, and was
right.
happy to respond to him that way. I still do. And I remember finally saying, gee, Mr. Straight, I know our interview's winding down, but goshers, can we maybe ask you a little Dark Shadows question? And he's like, sure, go ahead. So
Yeah,
that was
because you'd
fine.
already, I think you'd already paid respect by allowing him to speak
Oh,
about his whole career.
I mean,
So,
we talked for an hour
yeah,
about, we talked to the point that it was like, so is there anything else? It's
right,
like, no, no, that's okay. Thank you for your time.
yeah,
And it was great.
yeah,
I felt very lucky. Um, I
yeah. I
felt
mean, he's
very,
one of
very,
the
very
finest
lucky.
actors to be on Dark Shadows. I mean, he's
And and I hate saying that though, because on one hand, you see him as one of the great actors in the show because of how fresh he is when he
hmm.
comes on, and what a fresh presence he is. And I feel like there's a danger of that kind of casting a little shade on the actors who were working their asses off and had every day for years, up at that point, a couple of years nearly.
But he was
And
also a very, very facile actor. I mean, he knew what to do with his body and his
yes, he
voice
did.
and everything. I mean, he was a real professional there, and he had the experience that not everybody on that show had
No,
at
they
that
did.
time. And that's not being unfair because
It's
they,
not.
they all had really good talent, and they
And
were coming up.
and in judging those things, the other sort of humanizing element you have to bring in is that there's no double blind.
Mm,
We don't know what it would be like to have never met Louis Edmonds before,
sure, sure.
and to see Louis Edmonds enter as Nicholas Blair. I mean,
Right.
can you imagine? Can you imagine? It would have been luminous.
Yes. Actually, there are a
So
couple of scenes probably from All My Children that would have given you some idea of that.
I
Because
mean, that's
he
the
was
Langley
early,
character.
early Langley stuff. He was total con man and sneaking around and doing stuff.
We go back and see what of those are on YouTube. What an actor! All right, well,
Yeah.
Alan, I think we have said what needed to be said.
Sure.
Anything else on the
No, I'm
topic?
I'm 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 happy to have done this. I
That
think
was great.
it's a different it's a great facet of the show that not most people think about too much. You know, beyond what we're talking about is more about, like I say, the art and craft of writing and performing and getting the humor out of that. That's more deliberate or has some deliberation behind it. Although there is unintentional humor in it as well. I'm with you. I prefer the intentional humor. I think
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
stuff.
absolutely. And there's plenty there.
Yeah,
Alan, have a great night.
you
Thank you.
too, sir.